Yeah.
Too. All right, guys, welcome back to the channel. It's Victoria Scott. I'm here with Jared Feather, who probably doesn't need an introduction on my channel because the RP channel now has 2.8 million subscribers on the channel. So I have a celebrity here with me today.
Get the out of here.
All right, no, in all seriousness, you guys have seen him on my channel before. We've done a couple workouts together. We've done a Q&A kind of like this, just and that one was targeted towards women in midlife.
Yeah, training over 40, training over 50.
Training over 40 in their 50s.
That was a good one. Go check it out.
That was a great video. We'll link it below so you guys can check that one out too. But today we wanted to talk a little bit more about what it means to maintain muscle and also potentially downsize, detune, would you say demuscularize?
Yeah.
Certain areas if you need to.
Lose muscle mass.
You need to lose muscle. We talk a lot about building muscle, but there are certain people who have that question, I think.
Yeah,
Whether
it applies mostly to like athletes, applies mostly to a lot of competitors in the bodybuilding space. Female athletes specifically will be told your glutes are too big, your legs are too big in this area, or certain categories, hey, you need to match your upper with your lower, you need bigger delts, you need bigger back. So just keep your legs the same size and make sure you catch it up. So yeah, applying mostly to people like that, ex-athletes like yourself.
Former athletes. Yeah, so I was mentioning before, I played basketball for many years, and when I first started training or started getting into competing, I did figure. Figure was the only category at the time that was around. There was no bikini back then. And I had just really huge quads. I was very quad dominant. And I remember my coach back then had me doing a lot of circuits. I did a lot of stairs, running for lower body. And it was really just to balance out my lower and upper. We didn't even have enough time. I didn't have enough wherewithal at the time actually to do a build phase. Yeah, this is before the internet, you guys. No, before social media. And there wasn't a lot of talk about doing a build.
Yeah.
Like you really had to dig or know somebody who was in bodybuilding at that time, like early 2000s. So had I known that, I probably would have done a build first. But I got a little bit skinny. I was 127 pounds.
You were?
First show.
That's hard to believe.
I now compete at 147.
I know, that's tough to even imagine in my mind.
You can see my spine. But mission accomplished. My legs were so streamlined.
Yeah.
And my balance was my symmetry top to bottom was there.
And like you said, you hated how much cardio you did. So, in this video, we're going to try to talk about, are there better ways, easier ways to do that without having to just fucking kill yourself with cardio and make that the only thing you do?
So let's start with, what does it take to maintain? Because that is the question I get from a lot of clients that come in who they do a dieting phase, and sometimes it's more aggressive, right? You got to pay more attention to more time in the gym, more cardio time, the diet wears on you, and they're like, oh my God, am I gonna have to do this forever?
Yep.
And I'm like, no, I promise you, we're gonna back out of this and you're gonna be just fine. But what does it take for someone to maintain?
So, fortunate for you guys, my job as a sports scientist is to apply the science behind what we know and give you easy to follow numbers and guides for these types of things. And the thing you're asking me about is basically called like the maintenance volume for a muscle tissue. We can then push that further into the minimum effective volume. And the minimum effective volume is how little can I do and see some muscle growth. And then you have the maximum recoverable volume, which is the most amount of volume you can do in the gym before you start to kind of overreach or overtrain. And that applies systemically and it applies per muscle. So if we take per muscle and we're trying to downsize, and we'll take you for example, or you're trying to maintain, you need to catch your upper body up. Like let's say you need to catch your upper body up to your lower body. If you were in a position where you were able to maintain and just grow the upper body, what you would do is probably roughly like 3 to 6 sets per muscle group in the lower body
Per week.
And that is plenty. Not a lot at all. Like 3, you think about that, like, okay, I'm gonna come and I'm gonna do 2 sets of squats and a set of leg extensions and then a set of hamstring curls and then leave. And 1 time a week. So it's like, it is that easy to maintain muscle.
Would you say people are doing too much though?
A lot of people are doing way too much. Yeah, a lot of people are. Because it does get up into like pretty high ranges. Like if you look at MRV averages, and if you look at MRV averages when you're trying to like emphasize specific muscles, because you are going to put this on the back burner and emphasize this, it can get up there. It can get up 25, 30 sets a week.
Right. Yeah.
But averages is like 12 to, let's say, 20 for most individuals' MRVs. And that all has to go into like advancement level, how big the person is, female, male, things of that nature. So when you're maintaining a muscle and trying to bring up another muscle, you're generally hypercaloric. So that 3 to 6 applies.
So eating at least, so you're eating more calories than you need to sustain.
Right. So if you are, what do you call it to your clients so I can use your terminology?
So
do you say bulking?
I say lean builds.
Okay, so you say building.
You guys use the word massing.
I use massing.
Massing.
It's a little more of a sports science term.
Really?
Yeah. Rather than bulk. I'm gonna bulk, brother.
Massing.
That's like a bodybuilding bro
that
term.
Wants to mass.
Yeah, building mass. So we just say like building muscle mass.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
But a lean build phase.
Okay.
You're ingesting a little more calories than you're burning, and you're trying to intentionally put on some weight, muscle at least, and minimize the amount of body fat you're putting on.
Right.
When you have that recovery capability, your volumes that you can do shift. So the most important thing when you're maintaining a target muscle is understanding the diet phase you're in. If you're in a hypocaloric, so if you're in a deficit, what would you call that to your clients? A fat loss phase?
A deficit or fat loss phase.
A fat loss phase. You're losing body weight, hopefully mostly body fat, unless we are going to detune the body, and we'll talk about that. But you got to think about that as a shifting value. So instead of doing like 3 to 6, whereas 3 might not be enough to maintain the muscle size, you bump that up just a tad because you lack the recovery capabilities for that. So you got to apply a bit more stimulus there. Okay. So you might go 5 to 8 sets a week instead of that 3 to 6.
So if you were in a deficit, trying to lose body fat and maintain muscle, not necessarily gain muscle, you need a little bit more.
Just a little bit more.
Sets, more sets per
100%.
Okay.
So a little bit more than if you were going to be hypercaloric or isocaloric or in a lean build / a maintenance phase. Okay. And that applies across the board. So when it comes to basically just trying to lose that muscle, you could take that out completely. And the best thing you can do to lose muscle, if that's something somebody's interested in, is train that muscle group not at all.
Really?
Hypocaloric diet, really fucking hard, and input something fitness related that you have thought, I want to try that. Whether that's, you're like, I want to take up yoga classes, I want to take up boxing classes, I want to take up something that is pretty far removed from weightlifting, and the most far removed from weightlifting, the better. So cardio would probably be the most far removed from weightlifting, or yoga, or like Pilates.
Right.
Pilates is still a little bit more, you're using more muscle.
Yeah.
So if you think about it this way, the more you have to use a muscle in an activity, especially when it comes to applying load, anything like weight training or, boxing mitts even weigh something, you're getting a good shoulder workout, the further away from anything weighted you can get, the easier it will be to lose muscle in a specific area. So if you are a competitor, yeah.
So ladies, if you are trying to build muscle, cardio and yoga are not what you want to be doing.
You're not going to build much muscle doing this.
Can I tell you how many people I talk to and they tell me their schedule, and it's like cardio, yoga 3 times a week, and like 1 weightlifting session.
Yeah.
It's like the opposite. So.
Yeah. And if you're to that point, I know this isn't what the video is about, but to that point, if you are a middle-aged female who needs weight training for osteoporosis-ish, things like that, just being generally healthy, do not fear the weights, because we're talking about a very jacked former athlete who applied bodybuilding training to her routine for over a decade. And this is what she looks like.
Yeah.
She's sitting next to a,
not huge.
Yeah, she's not gigantic. And if you're that person who did cardio and yoga your whole life, or you just got into fitness and that's what you started with, and now it's time to apply some weights, you don't just blow up, and you're not going to.
Yeah, you have a lot of makeup work to do.
And if you want, you can just do the maintenance volumes and you'll still grow.
Absolutely.
Because it's a very new stimulus. Anything that edges closer to weight training is going to be better for you. So even if that's just you're doing body weight activities, hell yeah. And then a little more.
Okay, so let me ask you this. So if you were trying to lose some muscle from an area where you want less muscle, and if you were to do like a yoga or just stop training altogether, would you still have a good aesthetic look?
It's going to depend on
right. So that's
how
the key. It's
fast.
like you don't want to just look deflated.
Well, it's going to depend on how fast you lose, how long you lose, right? And how much protein you're eating.
Okay.
And things of that nature. So there's a little bit of a puzzle.
So you think that the diet component still plays a big role?
The diet is the most important thing in all of this, because if you want to lose muscle, Mike's trying to lose muscle right now in his lower body, right? His legs are just as big as I've ever seen them. I just saw him.
Wow.
He's been not training his legs for 4 months. 4 months?
Wow.
Still hasn't lost much muscle on his legs. So it's like, he's a bodybuilder his whole life. He's been eating a bodybuilder diet still. He's getting frequent feedings of protein. It's hard.
Good genetics.
Great genetics. And this is a 250-pound bodybuilder.
Yeah.
So if you're a female trying to lose the little muscle you have, your body's going to fight to keep it on a little bit, for sure. But for like someone like you, you're jacked. It's a similar situation as Mike. It's going to take you really focusing on being in that hypocaloric state, trying not to train that muscle specifically, trying to train the other muscles around it without getting that muscle involved as well, which is a huge component of that. Right.
Okay.
Because it might mean that you have to maintain quad size. Let's say you want to downsize your glutes, and if you're a bikini athlete, this will be good for you. You want to maintain quad sice, decrease glute size, like we talked about. Laurel, she had to do it, right? She had to do it.
Glutes. I actually loved her look that
I did too.
But
they said downsize your glutes.
Yeah.
So you would see them in the gym doing a lot of movements where they're trying to emphasize the quads and maybe some hamstrings while keeping the glutes out, and then not doing any isolation for the glutes. No hip thrusts, no kickbacks, none of that crap, because she needed them to be smaller. Lots of cardio. She probably did plyos. She probably did.
Yeah, she told me some light plyos and incorporating some running.
Yep.
Very
running.
slow, like kind of I would say not even running. It's like a slow jog.
So jogging is the most common practice in bodybuilding coaching for people who need to bring down like their glutes. I've seen it a ton, and it's not inherently the best thing. Like I said, harsh hypocaloric dieting and like bursts for that person might even be better.
Oh,
just
really?
hypocaloric dieting, not training the glutes at all.
So eating enough calories and just avoiding training that area will bring the muscle down.
A ton.
And still maintain a good. So I think that's the key thing, right? Because we can say on paper, did somebody gain or lose muscle? And you're looking at a piece of paper. Okay, yeah, the numbers say they gained or lost muscle, but how do they look?
Yeah,
right.
100%.
Because at the end of the day, no one's gonna say like, what's your DEXA scan? You know what I mean? You're on the beach or you're on a stage. You want to still look good.
And the thing is, we're talking about someone who's hypermuscular in an area, which means they probably had a good affinity for growth in that area. So if we're talking about somebody who had a really hard time building their legs, a really hard time building their glutes, or really like me, a really hard time building their biceps, the second I don't apply stimulus to that area and I diet down at the same time, I will lose that faster.
Yeah.
And then the second that I see, okay, that's the look, you can just start training it with that maintenance volume.
Okay.
And you'll be perfect. Just the second you're like, I'm at the point I want to be, maintenance. But again, just keep in mind that if you built a really nice look and now you're done with bodybuilding or you're moving on to other endeavors, it was easy for you to build that muscle, it's going to be a little harder for that to come away. So hypocaloric dieting, being in a deficit, making sure you're not training the area, and applying you can jog, you can do plyos, you can get further removed from weightlifting, because jogging technically still uses faster motor units, which means it's a more similar stimulus to weight training than doing downward dog.
Right.
You know what I mean?
So yoga is actually probably the worst at this point. Is that what we're saying?
Well, not inherently, but
don't offend anybody.
It's still fitness, right?
Depending on the goal.
Yeah, it's still fitness.
Talking about a goal.
Yeah, and being in a fitness environment alone is honestly, it has a lot of psychological health benefits and muscular benefits as well, especially if it's like a middle-aged woman who doesn't train at all. So no, not shitting on yoga. It's just like, it's a funny thing to say as a bodybuilder, like go do yoga and downsize.
Right.
So
Yeah, you don't hear a lot of bodybuilders talking about that. Probably for males, it's a lot more about like once you retire, it's probably not maybe the healthiest or desirable to maintain this level of size.
Not at all.
I mean, I even know bodybuilders, like Brad talks about this too. It's like your clothes, how do you buy suits, right?
Yeah.
So at some point you want to like make sure your clothes fit and it's easy to shop,
Yeah.
right? So I think there's a good number of men that you can look to that are retired from bodybuilding and have still a good look. I don't know a lot of females that have retired from sport and that maintain a really still good
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like
look.
women generally spend their whole lives to build this beautiful feminine physique, and then when they fall in love with it, especially the ones like former athletes, you fall in love with the way your body looks, the way it feels, and it's slim, it's sexy. You have nice muscularity. You can still wear dresses. You're not this hyper muscular fucking idiot like myself, who's just walking around in 4X shirts, looking like, oh, that's that bodybuilder guy. You know, like he looks like a dipshit. Yeah, some shit. So it's like most females aren't in that category unless they're competing in like a physique sport, like I said, where it's like let's get rid of some muscle. But you're at a point where you're like pretty jacked.
Yeah.
And you want to downsize a little bit.
So what I've
started
talking about on the channel recently is if I do compete next year, and I want to stay in the category, so I do compete in fitness with the FMG. You need to have some muscle, but not too much muscle that you are figure, because we do also have a figure category. And the conditioning matters a lot. But probably one of the only relevant feedback that I got from my last show with the WBFF was potentially being a little lower body dominant.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that was from just I filled out too much later in the day.
Maybe.
So it could have just been my peak.
You're also pretty jacked.
I am pretty jacked, especially my lower body.
Yeah.
It is true. So the feedback was either bring up the upper body to match the lower or bring down the lower to match the upper. I think I'd rather do the latter.
Yeah.
Just because the fitness category still should be good muscle development, but not overly developed where now you're moving into another category. So,
and it's cool they call it fitness because exactly what you're doing is exactly what I would say somebody who is into fitness should do. Like you're into fitness and the category is called fitness, ironically. But if there's ever been a fitness endeavor that you have wanted to try, this is the time to do it.
Everyone keeps telling me to do boxing.
Try it.
I used to do boxing.
Yeah. Did you like it?
I did an entire prep. I really enjoyed it. I actually did kickboxing. It was like kickboxing boxing combo, and I did sessions with a trainer for an entire prep. That was my only cardio.
Yeah.
And it was great. Probably not good at that time because I actually did need more muscle back then. So hindsight, I learned, and now it's actually relevant again. My challenge is the time to like go to a class or set up something like that.
You had time to do a leg day.
I know.
You just take the leg day out and you go box. It's literally that simple. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, instead of coming here and doing leg days, get to a point, you're hypermuscular in your legs. Mm-hmm. Your affinity to put on muscle, and people don't like to talk about this, but genetics are the most important thing in bodybuilding, bar none. Your affinity for lower body musculature is very high. Yeah. You losing muscle in your legs will take some time, but you could do it in a prep, especially when you're hypocaloric and you're in here boxing and you're not training your lower body at all. You're not gonna have a flabby look because you're still active. You're still in here doing some stuff. You're hypermuscular in the area. You can't just lose muscle. You're gonna lose fat too.
You don't think you need to be in a caloric deficit and training that way. You should still have enough calories and just change the training.
No, you need to be the easiest way to lose muscle is to be in a deficit and train that way. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And by train that way, I don't
hear that because I don't want to eat.
By train that way, I mean don't train that way. Don't train your legs.
So eat less and don't train, basically.
That is literally that's the easiest way to lose muscle.
Yeah.
That is so the reason it's that simple for me to say, my entire job as a bodybuilding and prep coach is preventing muscle loss for my clients when they're prepping for a show. It's that simple.
So you're like the opposite of that.
Exactly. What am I doing? I'm applying all this like rigorous training modalities and okay, and now we're at this phase of prep, so I got to add in a little more stimulus because this stimulus isn't good enough anymore. And if we keep doing this stimulus, you might lose some muscle, which is bad. So we got to apply new shit so that you don't do that. And then also, I don't want to be too hypocaloric because you need all this protein. And if we're losing body fat too fast, you're also going to lose muscle. Literally the opposite of that is what you're trying to do. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I've actually heard a couple other physique competitors that were trying to downsize. They were actually dropping from figure to bikini, who lowered their protein.
You could do that. You're going to lose.
Is that necessary?
You're going to lose muscle.
In a caloric deficit in general.
You're going to lose muscle. I think that if you lower your protein, you're missing out on some other benefits of protein as far as like metabolism goes, or joint health, hair, nails, blah, blah, blah. You could get into a situation where you lower it too much, but that is another thing we apply as a bodybuilding coach. I am making sure they're getting enough protein to maintain their muscle tissue.
Yeah.
You could definitely lower your protein.
I know, I really struggle with them. I'm like, I don't think I want to do that.
Yeah, you will lose muscle.
Yeah. I didn't like the look that I saw from that result either. So I think that was the big question mark, just circling back, is like, it's not just did you lose muscle, did you gain muscle? It's like, what are you looking like? Like, what is the visual look?
And that's the thing, for you didn't like the look.
I think it looked just atrophied.
You could have, and that's
I don't want to look atrophied.
That's
I want to look.
Atrophy is muscle loss.
More compact.
Yeah. So you got to get to a point where you dislike your look for a brief moment, and then start to apply maintenance level volumes to the muscles that you're like, I don't like what I'm looking like here. And then you'll see like the damage itself that you're creating, since you haven't trained for a long time, is going to create a lot of inflammation in that area. And you're going to be like, oh shit, my legs are filled out again, is what people will say. So the second you see that look, like, ooh, I don't know about that, train the lower body, do it for a couple weeks. And for you especially, you'll do 2 weeks of fucking training and you'll be like, I look great. So you're going to have to do that little teeter-totter.
I did have, I had a breast augmentation 2 years ago, and I did my 6 weeks out, started going back into the gym, but then I had a bunch of travel, and I ended up taking I gave myself too much momency, let's just say that. So by the time I circled around like 3 months later, I was looking very depleted and flat, and Andy's like, we may have lost a little bit of muscle here, and it didn't take but like 2 months, and I was like right back to where I was.
Oh yeah.
So my body definitely wants to grow.
Yeah. And like I said, you also got to take into consideration, you have recruited a high level of muscle to this area, and this is just going to get too nerdy, but you have.
Here we go.
I'll just call it muscle memory.
Just bring it on.
I'll just call it muscle memory.
Okay.
But it's technically like satellite cell proliferation to the area. The muscle memory in that muscle, it never goes away. So your affinity to get back to this, the way, like how easy it would be for you, is very high. Which is why you start to lose muscle, you don't like to look a little bit, you apply a little bit of training stimulus, you come do 5 sets of quads, couple sets of glutes, couple sets of hamstrings, you do it twice a week, and your legs are gonna look exactly how you want them to look, and you can keep hypocaloric dieting from there, and you'll be just fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about the mindset aspect of it, because, and this will again apply to most athletes, I think that it's difficult to, I actually think this would apply to anybody, just anybody in general who's going into a new bodybuilding type workout, is just to start to think about your training differently. Maybe you've always done the yoga, or maybe you've always done circuit training. And I remember that was a huge transition for me, to be like, okay, grab the dumbbells, do 8 reps, put them down, and sit. And I had to force myself to do that for, like, it was so weird to me when I first started training like that. But I realized if I wanted to put that upper body size on, which is not where my body wants to hold the muscle, I had to start training differently. It's very difficult. I'm a Taurus, by the way. I am a bit stubborn, so it's taking me some time to like process that I have to start training differently. And as an athlete, you just want to like go. Like I was just telling you, I'm doing my RDLs 245, and I'm doing weighted pull-ups at this point, and I love being like, look what I can do. Yeah. But that's probably not helping me very much.
It's not helping you very much.
With this goal.
But if you enjoy it, and you can get yourself into a position where you know all the tools now. You know you can lower your protein, you know you can diet hard, you know you can get on the stairs and increase your heart rate and be hypocaloric at the same time, and you'll lose muscle. It'll happen. And if every now and again you're like, RDL sounds fun, let's see how strong I still am, that weight will slowly come down. You're not gonna lose muscle and produce the same force. It's just not gonna happen. But for me, my best advice to somebody is to think about things that you've always wanted to try in fitness, like we said, your category, and give them a shot. Because you might go your whole life and then at this stage, pick something up that you had a really high affinity for, you got really good at, and you found a huge love for that you would have never tried before. Whether that's fucking jump rope, or you decide to go like with you boxing. Yeah, jump roping, random shit, swimming. Swimming's amazing. A lot of people have never gotten and tried to swim laps before. You know, try to get good at something like that. Some aerobic-based activity would be really good, honestly. And you could hate it.
Like step aerobics?
Anything, like biking.
Use like full on. Should I bust out my Taibo?
Oh my God, you could do that too. Legitimately, you could do some Taibo with Billy Blanks.
My fitness journey started with Taibo tapes, VHS.
I remember my mom doing those.
Make me feel old. VHS in the living room when I was in high school with one of my best friends. That's how my fitness journey started.
That is amazing.
And I loved it. So I could bust those out.
Yeah, shit like that. Insanity.
I never got into Insanity.
Yeah.
But I do know, like I said, I know a lot of people that's their go-to, and it's uncomfortable to go do something else because you haven't done it ever or done it in a while. So the mindset, I think, is a huge component of thinking outside the box to train differently for your goal.
It's cool because you're in a position where you're like, I need to lose muscle. Bodybuilding training keeps muscle on. I like it, but is there anything else that I like? Is there anything else that I want to try? Yeah. And you can easily do that. Yeah. So easy.
It's gonna be weird. It's gonna be an interesting season, you guys.
I'm the same way, but I've already put a lot of thought into it. So like when I'm done and I come down from stuff and I'm all, I'm getting healthy, I'm gonna go back into Muay Thai. I love Muay Thai. I did it for a long time. And like, it would make me happy to not have to worry about throwing 1,000 kicks of practice and taxing my hip flexors. So then I come try to squat for bodybuilding and I'm like too messed up and then I get hurt. So I had to take kickboxing out a long time ago, right? Yeah. And same with you with boxing. You're like, I wanted to put on the muscle. Yeah. So it's a good time to try different shit. Even if it is dumb shit, like you came in here and you wanted to max out on a deadlift. Like, it's weight training, but it's at least further removed from bodybuilding training. It's just one little thing you tried, and it's not enough stimulus to keep muscle. Like, if you're hypocaloric, you're gonna lose muscle still. So,
how important is frequency?
As for
gaining or losing?
Probably one of the most important things. I think with frequency of training a muscle group, especially when it comes to gaining, you can only do so much volume per session. And once you do that, you kind of need to go eat some food, chill, recover. And that amount of volume per session is not enough to last you a week. Once a muscle's kind of not sore anymore and recovered, you can hit that muscle again. And because muscles have different cross-sectional areas or different sizes, your delts are bigger than your biceps. Your legs are way bigger than your biceps. Your legs might need 1 or 2 sessions a week, and your biceps might need like 3 or 4. Because you apply the stimulus that you can. You're not doing 20 sets in one session, you're doing that across the week. So if you think about my biceps and my quads, my biceps probably need more volume, but I can only do like 4 sets, 5 sets per session. So I'm gonna have to split that up across the week. Yeah. It's one of the most important things that I think is missed quite a bit.
So for losing, one thing that I did last year when I was like, okay, or last year? Yeah, it was last year. I knew I didn't want my upper body to get any bigger. I still was training glutes pretty hard, lower body pretty hard going into my show, but I didn't want my upper body to get any bigger. So I reduced the frequency of training. It even got to a point where I was training, I think it was just a full session every like 10 days.
Awesome.
So as a strategy for maintenance, I think I maybe lost a little bit. But.
That you might have. But if it was like, let's say your legs, because again, they have a high affinity for keeping the muscle, it might have been fine. You might have came in here and let's say you did 12 sets in that session. That might have been plenty for the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, and then circle back around.
Yeah, exactly.
So there's a lot of different ways you could approach this.
Absolutely.
Sounds like.
Yeah.
I've talked to a few different coaches and getting different people's takes on it, and that's kind of what I concluded too. It's just like, should you just be running? Should you be doing other activities like a boxing or Muay Thai would be fun? Should you do plyos and circuit training? Like just circuit everything a bunch.
I think the biggest takeaway is just understanding that if you're hypocaloric or you're in a fat loss phase, you will achieve the look way quicker. And if you want to lose muscle, easy way to do that, eat less protein, like you said, could be a total viable strategy while in a deficit, while not training that muscle, while potentially doing some cardio-based activity. You will lose muscle in your lower body, especially like that.
So not only reducing frequency, but also doing another activity instead.
Totally fine. Absolutely. Just to keep the fitness aspect there. If you told me, Jared, you can still go to the gym, but you can't bodybuilding train, I'd be fine. I would be fine. But if you told me, Jared, you're not allowed to train anymore at all, or like, Jared, you can't train lower body anymore, I'd be like, okay, so what can I do on those days? Like, I'm not gonna not be in the gym on those days. What can I do? You know what I mean? So, especially for someone who needs to bring something else up, that's a great day to go train that muscle again instead. You do the maintenance volume for your legs, or you don't train them at all if you're trying to get rid of muscle there. And instead, you now have room and recovery capability, because you open that recovery capability to do, let's say, your delts in your back again. And now you have 3 times a week frequency for that, because you're able to, because you're not training lower body. And it can literally just be, okay, it was normally back, chest, and then I would do my legs. Now it can be, well, I do my back, I do my chest, and then I do a little bit of back with some arms.
Yeah.
And then,
Yeah, it's so interesting because, I think if you're somebody that follows someone like myself, or I don't know how your split looks these days, a lot of people do comparison.
Yeah.
They see someone like myself or someone more experienced and they go, oh, what's your split look like? And I'm like, I'm probably not the best thing to look at, because my stuff is so specific to my goal and where I'm at in the stage of my fitness journey, that most people, again, need to build muscle, probably need to be hitting that muscle group multiple times a week.
Oh, yeah.
And doing more of a traditional approach to hypertrophy training, I guess. Absolutely. Whereas when you're starting to look at some of these athletes, like a Laura Lee, I get questions about her training from clients that do follow bodybuilding a little bit, because she's doing this and she's doing that, and they're using all these special techniques, and I'm like, she's got a whole different special case going on there. Like, she has a very specific thing that she needs to fit into criteria wise, and where she's approaching this. So I think it's really interesting to have these conversations, because especially athletes, probably a good challenge for you as a coach too.
Oh yeah, 100%.
How do you make this bigger and just make that smaller? And do this, and it's like a potato doll.
To be honest, that's like the easiest part of it, and the secondary part of it is, if that's the client's goal and we've discussed it and that was their feedback, I need to make sure that they don't get fed the fuck up with the process. Like I'm talking to you about finding other fitness endeavors. Most of my clients are maniacs. They're gonna go to the gym, and it's my job to make sure I'm saying, hey, I know we have to bring this down, and this is what we're gonna do, and that gets rid of an entire concept for you that you're totally used to, part of your routine. So I need you to go to the gym and find your favorite cardio activity and just do it on that day, or whatever it may be. Hey, I'm gonna apply more back training this day. Are you cool with that? And they'll be like, yeah, that sounds great. So as coaches, it's cool, and we have the tools, and we know how to, and you know how to do this. You know, like, all right, you want to lose muscle, time to diet, time to not train that muscle and go do some other shit.
Yeah, I think my biggest struggle is the psychology of it. Just
psychology.
The mindset.
It really is.
Just like, man, am I really, and by the way, if you're a woman thinking you're going to put on too much muscle, this literally took me 15 years to get to this point of being like,
and that's a specific, and that's of optimizing your whole effing life around it too. That's not just 50, because people think about it like, oh, well, okay, so if I train with weights for 5 years, I'm gonna get almost that size. I don't want to be almost that size. It's like, no. She had a 5 to 6 meal every day, timed out around her training, paid attention to nutrient timing, signed up with a coach who put her on a machine, who had her training just dialed in every day for the last 15 years.
Yeah.
Diet, training, cardio, going through phases where she's building, phases where she's losing, competing. Like, it's not just, oh, I trained for 15 years and this is what I look like.
And I had bad years too. I had years I had to take, took almost 3 years off of, I was just kind of coasting for a period of time. And
oh, maintained just fine too.
I did maintain pretty well. And most of that was honestly just through diet. I wasn't even trying to do progressive overload. I was just like, let me get into the gym 5 days a week. I was doing some boxing.
And that's another testament to the diet thing. It's diet. A lot of it is diet. And if you want to lose muscle, same thing. Diet. You got to be in a hypocaloric diet. It's very difficult unless you're like a hypermuscular person on anabolic steroids who has trained to get to 250 pounds and you're hypercaloric. That guy can lose muscle if he stops training a muscle group, if he comes off anabolics and still, even though he's still eating, it's like there's so much.
These guys at that point, their genetics are just insane.
Yeah. So
it's crazy. I think that's a point that people don't really realize.
Yeah.
It's like genetics and time, how long you've been doing something. So do you think it's easier if you're an adult in their 50s or 60s and you've been just training for a long time, do you think it's harder or easier for those individuals to maintain muscle?
It'll be more difficult once they get to a certain age. If you had an ex-Olympic sprinter who had a huge glutes, pretty big legs, that sprinter is not going to have the same size glutes at 60 years old that they did when they were sprinting in the Olympics.
They'll probably still look pretty good.
They're going to look amazing. Right? They're going to look amazing still.
Yeah, because we've all gone into those old school gyms and you just see like some older dudes and they just look like they barely do 2 sets of bench press and they're just you can still look amazing. You will never be that level that you were if you were this hypermuscular, like especially professional bodybuilders. When you retire from bodybuilding, you're never going to look like you did on an Olympia stage ever again. It's just not going to. Still look good.
But you can still look amazing. Yeah.
Level.
Absolutely.
Stuff.
Yeah. Your maintenance volume might be a little higher than when you were younger, but it's not much higher. It's kind of that like shifting value, similar with the dieting thing. So like now I'm 50 years old, so my maintenance for my chest is more like 6 sets instead of 4. Okay.
How do you recommend somebody track that?
Depends. It really depends.
How do you know?
If you're maintaining your muscle, you could do the scans and stuff. It's not a big deal.
Just take photos?
Performance is the best metric.
Performance, okay.
Performance is the best metric. Like let's say I've done, I'll give a random client example. The client did 225 on like a flat bench press. Perfect technique. I looked it over. It was solid. And they got 10 reps on their first set and 9 reps on their second. 3 years later, they did 2 sets at 235, 10 on their first, 9 on their second. They probably grew some muscle. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Same technique, same amount of volume, a little bit heavier. They failed at 10 reps 2 years ago or a year ago, then they failed at 10 reps on 235 the next time. Mm-hmm. Same thing with just solid numbers across the board. So if somebody is trying to maintain their legs and going into that period, we're like, all right, it's time to maintain my leg size. They decided they picked the exercises for their sessions, hack squats or whatever. They did 225 for sets of 15. Then they got to the end of the period, we're like, all right, did I maintain my leg size? And they get on the hack squat and 225 feels pretty similar. And they do pretty similar rep range. Even if it's like a rep less, who gives a shit?
Yeah.
Like you maintain most of your leg size.
Yeah.
And now we can go back to growing them again. It's very simple.
You talked about sets. Is there an ideal amount of repetitions to be doing? So if you're doing 6 sets or 3 sets or whatever it is per week, does the rep range matter? It's
anywhere in that 5 to like 20-ish rep range with the load that corresponds with the rep range you're getting.
Right.
So for maintaining muscle, I'm a big fan of being in the lower rep ranges and using heavier compound movements because it's easier to maintain your muscle that way. And
less
you're not, maybe in a sense, but it is such that you are not applying that typical hypertrophy stimulus. Like if I had somebody doing 2 sets of 15 on a hack squat in a maintenance phase, that's probably still a pretty good stimulus to grow some muscle tissue. And I try to stay away from that because I want them to also, because my people aren't just maintaining indefinitely. They're usually maintaining the muscle for this period of time. And then if I keep them in that lower rep range, it resensitizes that muscle to higher rep ranges. So now when you go back to higher rep ranges, you're really ready to grow. So I tend to lower the rep ranges quite a bit.
Lower, and then at some point in the future,
when you want to go back to growth, go back up to that like 7 to 20 instead of being, because sometimes even like my straight legs will get to like 4 reps.
Really?
And I'm like, oh, that's it. Hamstrings are good. Huh? Yeah.
Wow.
If I'm maintaining. Yeah.
I did not know that.
Yeah. So like you can think about it this way. Typical periodization is like, let's say you want to grow, bodybuilding, hypertrophy training. You want to maintain, feel free to do a strength block. Like if you just put your clients in super lower reps, focusing on strength, couple sets here and there, that'll maintain your muscle indefinitely, whatever muscle you're at.
Do you think that applies though for average lifestyle clients? Because, and I asked this question because we're also making the assumption that the person understands how to hit that close to failure or hit that, that they're working hard enough.
Yeah, you keep adding weight to the bar and they're going to find failure.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. You don't tell them stop at 5. You say stop at what you perceive at 2 in the tank, stop. And then next week you say.
It's hard to teach.
Yeah. So
it's not hard to teach. I wouldn't say it's hard to teach. I think it's just being with somebody and pushing them to do it.
For Gen Pop, people say that all the time, but I'm going to actually counterpoint that. I think for Gen Pop, it's easier.
To teach
because we're always worried about, I'm going to do like this accumulation period. When do I deload? How do I manage my fatigue? You see them 3 times a week. Fuck their fatigue. I'm going to keep adding weight to the bar, and they're going to keep sending me videos, and their technique better be the goddamn same. And if it's not, they're failing, okay? So how many weeks are you adding weight to the bar until they find failure? Like if my client starts at 225 on bench, and they got 5 reps, I'm like, all right, 235, I want you to do 5 reps again next week.
I don't think
245.
I don't think a lot of coaches or trainers, even in-person trainers, really push that.
Yeah.
I really don't.
No, not really.
I think that, especially with how many people I've coached over the years, it's like they've never had anyone really tell them to keep going, keep pushing. You can do more. You can do more. And that's what I actually did a call with our clients this past week talking about building. And it's not that a beginner can just magically just stronger and stronger and stronger every week. You probably just were underestimating your strength to begin with.
100%.
And the light bulbs are starting to go off and you're like, oh, let me add a little bit more.
And with that, they're going to have more technique acquisition too. So they're going to get better at the movement. Yeah. So it might be 10 weeks before you find them. And then their 225 for 5 at 1 in the tank is actually now 275. And they're like actually failing. Yeah. Because I had 280.
Took them that long to find that spot.
Exactly. But that's totally awesome because they can train for a longer period of time and not realize that accumulated fatigue. And you don't got to like pull them back and manage their fatigue and like think about deloads. So that intermediate beginner level person can train for like 10, 15 weeks now instead of like, okay, well you train for 6 weeks. All right, let's pull back a little. Then next week we'll go back up. It's just, all right, you're telling me that this is 1 in the tank. I'm watching the video. I don't think it is. So we're adding 10 pounds next week and the technique better be the same. They send it again and I'm like, okay, that's still bullshit. 10 more pounds. Yeah. How many times can you do that until they find failure? Yeah. All right, cool. You think this is failure? I'm gonna make you drop that shit on your chest. Find a training partner next week because here's 275. See what happens.
I used to have clients in person. I'd be like, can you do 5 more? And they would be like, I think so. Do it. Can you do another 5? Yeah. Do it. Yeah. And it wasn't until I would get to like another 15 that they were now starting to be like, okay, I'm truly getting to that level. Yeah. That's how much people undershoot what they really can do.
Yeah.
And I saw this firsthand when I was training people in person all the time.
And that is why a lot of trainers just take people, mess them up, send them home.
Yeah, and it's easy to just, honestly, it's more work to correct somebody. It's more work to sit there and work with them and try to get them to change their angles and push harder. It's more effort, and I think there's a lot of coaches and trainers that are lazy, frankly.
Exactly. That's your job.
Yeah.
Do your job.
So last question for you. What do you think is more difficult? The deficit, building, or maintenance?
For myself?
We'll do both. For yourself or for clients?
For clients, especially the clientele you work with, building is by far the hardest thing possible.
Why?
Psychologically. You got these women, especially the clientele you work with, women who want to look a certain way, who send you videos of Laura like, they're like, hey, look what she's doing. Like, this is what I want to look like. And I'm like, okay, you are 50 pounds of fat away from even thinking about looking like that. We need to cut you down. Not only that, you just dieted for 12 weeks and now I want to maintain you. And they think, maintain? What?
Yeah.
I want to keep dieting. And then you get them to a point where they're starting to finally actualize that physique that they finally wanted and embodied. And they're like, well, I still want to build muscle. And you're like, well, now we're going to do that. But check this out. Here's a bunch of calories and you're going to gain weight.
Yeah.
And that is one of the hardest things for especially like a middle-aged woman who's on their fitness journey to seriously like conceptualize.
Yeah.
It's difficult.
It really is. It's the hardest thing I think I've seen.
Yeah.
What's the hardest for you?
To be honest, dieting has never been hard for me.
Really?
I only got hungry at the end of my last contest prep, which was 28 weeks. And I didn't even stop because of that. I stopped because with what I do and the hormone fluctuations, I was just, anytime I went back into a deficit, there was like 5 pounds of water retention. My cortisol was crazy. I needed to get healthier. It was just too much, too long as far as like the sports supplements that I do. And I had to stop. So I could have went for another 15 weeks. It was on sheer hunger. I don't give a shit. Like, I'll be hungry. I starved my whole childhood. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not worried about it. So, gaining is tough. I get to a point where I start looking at food. I don't even want it. I got so bad that I improved for a year and a half. This last time I improved, which is longer than normal. I was so sick of food by the end of that I didn't even feel like I was dieting until 16 weeks into my diet, because I still had like 400 grams of carbs a day. I was still eating 6 meals a day. I was still having higher glycemic sources post-workout, and usually I pull that out of a diet because it's like you want more filling shit. But I was still eating high glycemic carbs, drinking carbs, and like I still didn't want it. I was like, this sucks.
I know.
So putting on size, like right now I'm like, food.
So I would agree with that. I think that more beginners, they think that the dieting is the hardest part, and maybe it seems like that on the onset. And I hate to break it to you, but building is actually much more difficult. And you'll hear experienced people like us say, even as long as we've been doing this, the building aspect is still very difficult.
It's definitely the toughest thing psychologically too. I think like the second the fat went to my face after the show, I was like, damn it.
I know, I'm like, I have to go up a size. I think maintenance can also be a little bit tricky for a lot of people.
Maintenance for a high-level athlete is the hardest.
Yeah.
That's because you got to get training involved
motivation. Like you're like, I think having a purpose is a really big thing.
Because the purpose is to take this point in time to understand you're pulling back a slingshot for results later on.
Yeah.
And this here is so hard for people because they just want this.
Yeah.
And you got to pull it back for the rock to travel further.
But it still requires like a level of focus, a level of tracking, a level of discipline just to maintain in and of itself. It still requires efforts.
Yeah.
And that's why I would say maintenance is the real MVP, because that's where you should be living your lifestyle most of the time. And a lot of people can't do it if they feel like they don't have a goal, and so they just go dig holes in their backyard and they create problems for themselves.
And maintenance for your clientele is very difficult because, especially if you're dieting them in a periodized manner, we're like, hey, we got to create a new settling point. You got to chill this body weight for a little bit. They're like, but I'm seeing results. And then you're like, okay, but you got to maintain because we need your body to get used to this body weight. We need it to get used to it. And
It's
then
not a free-for-all.
It'll be so much easier for you to get down, and you're going to want to get down, and you're not going to be hungry when you get down. And if we do fuck up, this will be the new body weight you go to instead of this one.
Right.
But then they get 2 weeks into maintenance and you start to see this on the scale.
Like, oh, I can have donuts, I can have this, They lose direction.
Exactly.
Yeah, and that's why you're always like, okay.
Yeah. Maintenance is tough. It's tough.
Yeah. It's tough. I think maintenance and building are probably the most underestimated.
100%.
People anticipate fat loss being difficult.
Yeah.
But it's the thing that you don't anticipate that's really going to bite you in the ass.
Oh yeah.
Right?
100%.
So, well, great. This was a great discussion. I hope you guys got so much value from this. I know it's a little bit of a different discussion than I think what most people are talking about. It's either fat loss or building, bulking, massing.
Yeah. Whatever you want to say.
So, but just a slightly different perspective. And I think overall, like, the big takeaway is just being willing to look at alternative approaches and thinking about your training differently depending on what your goal is at any given time.
Yeah, just if this is something you're seriously considering, is like losing muscle in specific areas or downsizing your muscularity, find your fun in fitness. That's the best way to put it.
Sounds like a tagline.
Just find your fun in fitness. That's it. Like legitimately, that's the easiest way to just take the psychology out of it.
I love that. Hashtag.
Hashtag find your fun in fitness. We're gonna see it all over.
All right, guys, thank you so much for watching. Comment below if you guys like this video and what else you want to see, and we will see you next time.